Hello, it's Nancy with Better Life Blog, and today we are on lesson 2 of our Cutting Basics course. I'm really excited that you're here. You can totally do this. I know you've got your machine, you are ready to go, you want to learn how to use it. We're going to do it together. So now that you've got your machine set up, you've got your software installed, we are going to go through some exercises just to show you the basic functions of your software. And I've got this really great practice file with some exercises. We're going to go through each exercise. And as you go through each exercise, you're going to learn some of the different tools that are available to you in your software. It's not hard, but I'm going to walk you through it. So if you haven't already, make sure that you go to betterlifeblog.com/cuttingbasics so that you can download all the files that we're going to need throughout this entire course. We're going to be making some awesome projects together. I'm giving you some free files. This course is free. You've hit the jackpot. This is an awesome way for you to get going and learn how to use your machine.
For this unit, I want to make sure you have Silhouette Studio installed and set up. And although it's not necessary, I highly recommend upgrading Silhouette Studio to the Designer Edition or higher. A link can be found in the description box, and I'll talk about that a bit later on in this lesson. And finally, you'll want to have a great attitude. This is going to be fun and informative.
Okay, so I've got my Silhouette Studio open, and the first thing I want you to do is go ahead and open your cut file for Unit 2. So you'll want to go to File, Open. You'll want to locate your course cut files. So here I've got my course cut files, and under lesson number 2 or unit number 2 is this practice folder, and then we're in Silhouette Studio, so go ahead and click on that. And you've got two options here. So if you have the free version of the Silhouette software and you haven't upgraded, go ahead and open the DXF file. If you are, if you've upgraded to Designer or more, then you'll want to open the SVG file. Now, I highly recommend upgrading if you can, because let me show you the difference between these two. I'll go ahead and open both of the files and click OK. Here we go. Okay, so I've got the SVG file, and then I've got the DXF file. Now you can still see all the outlines for the DXF file, but there are no colors. And then there's one other major difference that's going to make things a little bit more challenging, is that the insides of shapes are not actually connected, so they're separated. So what you would have to do is you would click and highlight the L, for example, and then you would go over here to the Shapes panel, the Modify panel, and then you would either click Subtract or make Compound Path. If you do Subtract, then there you go. So it's just a couple of extra steps that you have to do, but you have to do that for every single shape that has like a circle inside of it or something like that. Okay, so that's just one extra step. So I encourage you, if you can, to upgrade to the SVG. It just makes your life a little bit easier. It's not a deal breaker. As I said before, you can definitely use the DXF. You just have to know that extra step that you would need to take, which is to either subtract or make a compound path with that. Okay, so let's get started with the SVG cut file. Here we've got 9 different exercises, and we're going to do them together. And once you're finished, you'll know how to do a lot of different things, and you'll be a lot more comfortable with this software. Now, there is so much that you can do with Silhouette Studio, and especially since there are different versions of the software. So I'm not going to cover everything. I'm just going to cover the things that I think you're probably going to use most often. So let's start with the modify function. Actually, before we start with the modify function, the first thing that you need to do is you need to know how to group and ungroup objects. So right now, I just clicked on the star and you saw that I have this bounding box around this, and I'm basically able to move everything as an entire unit. So if I want to modify and manipulate objects individually, then I will need to ungroup this entire set. So there are a couple ways that you can do it. And the first way is that you can click on this box right up here at the top, and it looks like 2 boxes kind of overlapping. And so you can just click that and that ungroups the selected shapes. And you can see as soon as I did that, you can see these faint little boxes over every single object that's on this selection. So I have all of these selected right now. If I click outside of there, now I can click and manipulate like all the individual pieces on here. So that is really handy. And let's say you want to regroup a certain group of objects. So maybe I want to group this. What you would do is you would just click down with your mouse, drag it over the objects that you would like to select, and then you can just click group. So I said there are a couple ways that you can ungroup. So you could ungroup using this button over here as I showed you before, or you can right click and then you can just, it's about 2/3 of the way down, ungroup, and that just ungroups them. Okay. And same thing with the group. You can right click and group it as well. Okay. So modify is actually a group of functions. And let me close this here so I can show you how to get to it. The modify set of functions can be found over here on the right hand side. It's a modify panel. And so it's got all these different things that you can do with your shapes. And so I could take this, so let's say I wanted to take this circular shape and put it over the star, click and drag over both the shapes. And I kind of showed this to you before when we were looking at the DXF file, but you can subtract. And what that does is that basically subtracts the shape from the shape that you had before. I'm going to click, I just clicked Control or Command Z, which is an undo function, but you can also use these arrows up here at the top, which are undo and redo, and that will just allow you to kind of go back in time or go forward in time with your actions. So those are really convenient. And by the way, these are also really convenient. This is the zoom in and zoom out. So if I wanted to zoom in on my workspace here just a little bit, you can zoom in just like that with the magnifying glass. Okay, so back to the modify. Another thing that we can do is we can intersect. If you select two objects, you can see that when I click intersect, it will only leave what was intersected. It leaves the shape that was intersected there. Divide is another one that you can do. And so what that did was it divided it into 3 separate shapes. So undo, 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 okay? And I'm leaving the weld because that's gonna be our second function. And we're going to use that a lot. Because whenever you're doing like a cursive font, you really want to make sure that this is cutting all as one piece. So let me show you, if I wanted to send this to my machine, up in the top right hand corner is the send tab. Let's just go ahead and click on that and see what it looks like. If I zoom in here, you can see all these red lines are telling me what the machine is going to cut. So if I zoom in, this is how it would cut this. And I don't want it to cut it in all these funky little pieces. I want it to cut the love out in one fluid, continuous cursive shape. So I'm going to go back to the design, and then what I'm going to do is click and drag, and that way I have all 4 letters selected, and then I'm going to go to weld. And so now if I were to go back to send and I zoom in, whoops, zoom in, not out. Okay, there we go. So we have our love and it's one continuous shape. All right, so the third function that I want to teach you guys is the offset. Now this is really cool. This actually doesn't exist in Cricut Design Space for Cricut users. So I use both Cricut and Silhouette. So this is one of the things that I really do like about Silhouette is that you can do an offset, which is really convenient. And so what that means, what an offset is we've got a really thin font. It's a really pretty font, but it's also a really thin font. And if I were to try to cut this out on vinyl, it would get destroyed. It just, when stuff is really thin, when you cut out something that's really super thin, it is so much harder to work with and so much harder to maneuver. That little dot right there, that will not last 1 second. So what you want to do is you want to try to make this a little bit thicker. And so if we go to this little star that kind of looks like it has an outline, this is the offset panel. And so what we want to do is we want to create an offset. So just click on that where it says offset. And this little red line is showing you where it potentially could be. So we've got the distance right here, and you can kind of adjust it however thin or thick you want it to be. And so let's say I want to make it, and you can get a little bit more granular here if you wanted to type the size. So let's go ahead and make this, let's say 0.22. That looks good. I'm going to go ahead and click apply. Oh, and by the way, you could change the corners. So whether you want the corners to be sharper or more curved, and then just go ahead and click apply. And so there we go. We have our offset right here. And it's actually two separate shapes right now. So we've got our thin piece, and then we've got our thick piece right now. And you can, over here in the upper left-hand corner, you can actually give it a color. Oops, don't forget about the dot. Okay, so we've got a color here, and that is our little bit thicker shape. All right, so I'm gonna go down here to the resize. All right, resize, this is super duper important. So we've got our resize function, and you know, obviously right now the size, so when you click on it, you can see that the size is listed right there. So this is 0.174 inches, it's super tiny, 0.7 inches wide, and we definitely want to make this bigger for our project, whatever our project is. You measure out the size of your project, the size of the surface that you want it to be on. And so what you can do is you can click on the corner and make it bigger or make it smaller, okay? And depending on what size you want, you could just do it just like that if you kind of wanted to eyeball it. Or another thing that you can do, you could click on it, and up at the top, you'll see right over here, it tells me what the width is and it tells me what the height is. Now, if I were to change this to 3 inches and hit enter, okay, it just made it wider. And so now my image is not proportionate. Now that might be what you're looking for, but if you wanted to keep it proportionate so that it grows, you know, the height will also grow along with the width, what you would need to do is there's a padlock right over here, and it looks like it's unlocked. So you want to lock the aspect ratio by clicking on that, and now it looks like the lock is closed. And so over here, when I change this to 3 inches and I hit enter, it just grew to 3 inches, but the height also grew, and it grew proportionally. So that's exactly what we want. So just be aware if you don't want it to be grown proportionally, if you want to be able to kind of change the aspect ratio around, you would just then unlock it, and then it would, and you know, you can make it 5 inches, and now it's super long. Okay, so on to the next function. So we've got flip. Now this can be really convenient. It's a really simple thing, but if you don't know how to do it, it can be really frustrating. So it's not that hard to do. So all you need to do is just right click and go flip horizontally. Super easy, right? Another function that you could do, right click again, is flip vertically. So you can make it upside down, you could make it flipped mirror image, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And I personally use this, we're going to cover this in a different lesson, but when we're talking about heat transfer vinyl, you might hear people say that you need to mirror your image. I'll explain all that in a future lesson, but for me, and you don't have to do it this way, there's 2 ways to do it. For me, I personally like to mirror it right here, just like this. I like to flip it this way. The other way that you can do it is at the very, very end when you're sending it to your machine, but I personally don't like to do it that way. So I'll show you guys in a later unit when we're covering heat transfer vinyl. But now you know how to flip your images. All right, now we're on to rotate. And rotate is also very, very simple. And so the way that we do that is, see this little green dot right up here? When I hover over this green dot, you can see this little circular arrow right there. And all you do is you just click it and move it around. Super cool, right? And if you want it to kind of, like let's say you want it to be on a specific, you can hold down your shift key and it kind of snaps into place in certain key points. Like when I'm trying to rotate it 90 degrees, it kind of snaps into that 90-degree spot. Or 180 degrees, it kind of snaps right into that 180-degree spot. So if you're holding down your shift key, it's going to snap into those key locations. All right, guys, we're almost done. We've got one more row. So arrange. So there are times when you might need to change the positioning of the layers that you see in front of you. So right now we've got kind of a yellowy circle right over here. We've got this kind of lime colored circle, and then we've got this darker green circle. Now, what if I wanted to move this green circle to a different position? Well, up here, there are 4 different function buttons. And so depending on what you want to do, so if I wanted to just hover over it and you could kind of see what it says. So this one says send to back. This one says bring forward. This one says send backward. Oh, and I missed this one. This one says bring to front. So for this one, I want to send it backward. And so now you could see it's behind the lime green one, but it's still in front of the yellow one. Okay, or if you wanted to take this one, send it to the back. Okay, it's all the way in the back. So very convenient. And you can just control where exactly you want each object. Okay, the align. All right, this one is also very, very useful when you know how to do this. Sometimes, you're trying to kind of space things together and you can't quite get it exactly the way that you want it. So rather than doing it by hand, there's actually a function that will help you to align these perfectly in a line, either horizontally or vertically, and it will allow you to space them evenly. So I'm just going to click and drag over all 4 objects. And then over up here at the top, it looks like sort of like a graph with a line through it. This is the align function. So it kind of gives you a visual of how it will align. So this is kind of a left align. It's going to align all of the objects to the left, or to the center, or to the right, or to the bottom, or to the middle, or to the top. Okay? The other thing that it can do is adjust the spacing. So this isn't going to do anything because they're all on the same vertical position. But this one is going to adjust the spacing horizontally between them, which is really convenient. So now I have 4 perfectly evenly spaced objects. This is super convenient and something that a lot of people don't know. All right, and then the last one here is select by color. So sometimes you have a whole bunch of objects all over your canvas and you want to select them all, but instead of going through clicking each one, let's say you wanted to select all of the blue objects on the page. This is really convenient. What you can do is up here at the top, you can select by color. So you can actually select everything, which is also very convenient, but you can select by color. How cool is that? Okay, so when I clicked that, you'll notice that this little panel opened up over here on the side, and I can either select it by line or I can select it by fill. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see this exact shade of blue that I'm looking for, and I click it and it just selected all the objects on the page that have that blue color. And so now I can manipulate those. I can change the color. Let's say I wanted to change the color to, I don't know, a different shade of blue or something like that, or turquoise. Okay, so I've been able to select, I was able to select these two blue objects. Let's say I wanted to select all the black objects and change it to, a different color. The color of these objects are not really relevant to what you're cutting. So when you're cutting something, it's cutting whatever's on this page. So if I put, an orange piece of vinyl and I start cutting, it's gonna just cut whatever vinyl I put. So it doesn't know what color I'm putting necessarily. The purpose of having colors here, there are a couple purposes. The first purpose is for you visually to kind of know what you're looking at and to kind of design things the way that you want them to be. And the second purpose is if you are doing a print and cut, it's going to print the colors that you have set here. So if you're doing just cutting and you're not doing any printing, then the colors that you have here are really not relevant, other than the fact that it just helps you visually. So I hope you guys found this helpful. I hope you learned a couple of new little tricks here and you feel more comfortable using this.
Now you know the basics of using your software, and next we are going to create this mug using adhesive vinyl. Coming up, you'll make these 4 projects. They're easy enough for a beginner, but they'll teach you the foundations you need to create so many amazing things with your machine. After that, if you want to go further and stretch your creativity with some spectacular projects and thoughtfully designed cut files, I want to invite you to join VIP Crafters Club. It's a monthly subscription where I come up with a new project each month for us all to make together, and you'll get a new surprise set of cut files each month. You'll also get access to an entire library of all of our past projects and cut files. We even do live crafting each month. Now, this is a premium group, so it isn't free. However, if you keep your eyes peeled, you will see a great discount coming up a bit later on in this course. So stick around, stay tuned, and keep your eyes peeled. And I'll see you in the next unit.